Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Chris Leak, and I'm the chair of the City County Planning Board. I now call to order the February 10th, 2022 meeting, which will be conducted remotely. Due to the state of emergency, all planning board members are also participating remotely. I will now ask our acting planning director, Chris Murphy, to call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Chairman and Planning Board members. George Bryan.
Here.
Melinda Dunnigan.
Here.
Walter Farabee.
Here.
Jason Grubbs.
Here.
Clarence Lamb.
Here.
Chris Leak.
Here.
Mo McCrae.
Here.
Brenda Smith.
Here.
Jack Steelman.
Here.
Thank you. When there is a vote, a roll call vote will be conducted. Each board member will be recognized and asked to clearly state their vote for the record. All guests participating in this remote meeting, either through Zoom or by phone, will remain muted until recognized by the board for comments. Today's meeting is being broadcast live on TV 13 and is also being live streamed on the city's website. The meeting will be also replayed on TV 13 tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. and Sunday at 4 p.m. Our first order of business today will be the consent agenda. These are items for which the petitioner is requesting withdrawal or continuance, or items for which staff has recommended approval and no one has signed up to speak in opposition. For our public hearings today, each side will have a total of 12 minutes. There is no rebuttal period. Once you have been recognized by the board, staff will unmute your microphone so that you can provide your comment. After the public hearing is closed and the board goes into work session, no one is permitted to speak unless the planning board asks them a question. The items under section B of our agenda will require final action by the elected body, either the city council or county commissioners. As such, votes taken today are recommendations which are considered by the city council or board of commissioners during its review of the request. For special use district zoning requests, the petitioner must identify the intended use or uses of the site and give specific details on how the site will be developed. If you are addressing the board today, we would ask that before you begin your comments, please give us your name, address, and zip code for the record. Before we go into official business today, we do have a very honored guest with us, Mr. Gary Roberts, Jr., who has retired after an illustrious career with the city of Winston-Salem. And I have asked Ms. Dunnigan, our vice chair, to please read the resolution that we have prepared for Mr. Roberts.
Okay. This is a resolution honoring Gary H. Roberts, Jr. upon the occasion of his retirement. Whereas Gary H. Roberts, Jr. has served the city of Winston-Salem and Forsyth County, North Carolina, from October 23rd, 2000 to December 31st, 2021. And whereas Mr. Roberts served as staff to the City County Planning Board in the Department of Planning and Development Services. And whereas Mr. Roberts served as the primary liaison between the department and the town of Walkertown during his tenure. And whereas his duties also included analyzing zoning petitions and presenting staff reports before the City County Planning Board, working directly with the public at the zoning counter, and providing support during outreach for small area plans. And whereas he established long-lasting relationships with and provided excellent customer service to residents and developers throughout Winston-Salem and Forsyth County. And whereas during his tenure, he was known for promoting well-planned quality development that would be beneficial for the community, including working on numerous ordinance amendments in the town of Walkertown and helping to revise the standards for planned residential developments in Winston-Salem and Forsyth County. And whereas he was essential to the department's maintenance of zoning archives for public use, and whereas he distinguished himself with membership in the North Carolina Association of Zoning Officials, and further distinguished himself with membership in the American Institute of Certified Planners. And whereas he was a champion for the aesthetic, health, and quality of life benefits of walkability and street trees. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the City County Planning Board of Forsyth County and Winston-Salem, North Carolina, pauses to recognize and thank Gary H. Roberts Jr. for his many years of outstanding service to the citizens of Winston-Salem and Forsyth County, and wishes him health and happiness in the future. Be it further resolved that this resolution be made part of the public record, and a copy of this resolution be furnished to Gary H. Roberts Jr., signed this 10th day of February, 2022. And just personally, Gary, I wanted to say thank you so much for answering all the questions, because I know you were the one I went to with questions, and you tirelessly answered them. Also, we spent a lot of time on sign check together before the pandemic, driving around Winston-Salem, and I very much appreciated that. We even got in a minor fender bender at one time. So I wish you all the happiness in your retirement.
You're muted, Gary.
If anyone, Gary, before we let you have comments, I'm going to see if any of the other planning board members would like to say anything. We also are honored to have council member Annette Scipio on the line with us, so I will let her bring up the rear. But Gary, I will see you. George, I'll start with you, sir.
Yes.
We'll just go all around.
Gary, we're good. We already miss you. And I think I saw you during one of your last days up there. And especially miss those ride-arounds that we have, and the, being able to talk about the cases when we were actually in that environment, and being able to look at the various sides of it, and you angling around to get a photograph, even though you're not a photographer. But particularly appreciate your knowledge about trees and what you've done in terms of promoting them in the planning process. So thank you. We'll miss you.
Thank you, George.
Anyone else, Mr. Grubbs?
Gary, thanks so much for your service. Really appreciate all you've done to sort of help me learn what I'm doing as a member of this board, and certainly going to miss your insight, your professionalism, absolutely, and also your strong sport coat game is going to be missed. One of the things that I think anybody you talk to that's dealt with Gary in a professional setting will tell you that one of the things he really, I think, shined at was trying to find some kind of alternative or some kind of way that you could balance competing concerns and still, advance, a planning case. And so thank you for that. Thank you for the example you set for members of the staff, and we're definitely going to miss you.
Thank you, Jason. It's been a pleasure to work with you.
Mr. Farabee?
Congratulations, Gary, on your retirement.
Thank you, Walter.
You were always great when I worked in planning, helping me out. And I remember you always showing me things. I definitely remember when we had our meetings, you always talked about public streets and sidewalks. And I remember terminal vistas, you used to bring that up a lot, but you were dedicated to the importance of pedestrian friendliness and vegetation. And so I hope you really enjoy your retirement, and I know you'll find something else to keep you busy.
Thank you so much, Walter. I really appreciate that. Great to work with you too.
Thanks.
Mr. Lamb?
Gary, this is Clarence. Just
Hey,
to
Clarence.
I'll mention the same things. You're always technically proficient, could answer any question, and you always took a real measured approach, a balanced approach, and I appreciate that. But I really appreciate the kind of guy, kind of person you are, your heart for ministry, and all of the many hundreds of hours of things that you provided. Really appreciate your work in that arena too. And I already miss you. I've already had to bother Brian with calls now, and he's done a good job of, getting me on to the right person. But
I'm sure.
really wish you the best in your retirement and hope it's a wonderful retirement. Congratulations for living long enough to retire. That's wonderful.
Praise the Lord. Clarence, thank you so much. I appreciate your words.
Ms. McRae, Ms. Smith, or Mr. Stillman?
I'm just going to say, as like, I know Walter had his moment in planning staff, so I feel like I've had the least amount of time with Gary, but I did see him at the public house, so
That's
I have
right.
that on all. And but I do feel jealous that I didn't get to ride around in the car and experience that part. But I appreciate all of your very thoughtful presentations and your knowledge, and I hope you really enjoy your retirement and live it up. Enjoy some of the work that you did.
Thank you so much, Mo. Yeah, it's great to see you, and thanks for your service on the board. We're better for it. Thank you.
Hi, this is Brittany, Gary. I guess I'll
Brenda.
just sort of chime in with what everyone else has said about your phenomenal combination of professionalism and then just the quality of the person that you are in caring about your work, but caring about other people you worked with and the community, all of us that always came across in what you were doing. And I'm going to miss your little extra note on the Christmas card every year. So if anybody else wants to step in and do that,
yeah,
you can
he's
try.
the reason for the
Very much
season.
appreciated.
Thank you, Brenda. Been great working with you too, and getting to know your husband a little bit as well. Thank you so much for coming to my retirement party. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Wouldn't have missed it. Thank you.
Mr. Stillman,
Muted.
you're on mute, Jack.
You're still muted.
Jack, you're still on mute.
There
Now,
you are.
are we good now? Thank you.
Yes.
There aren't many people to which you can say day in, day out, month after month, year after year, you treated everyone that ever called, that ever came to see you in the exact way, no matter large or small. And that's something that I've always admired about Gary. And the hard time it is sometimes in your shoes to have done that at the time, but you did it faithfully, and that faith shone through. I'll just close with a more sarcastic note and say to the members of the board, if you don't think working for 21 years in the planning department takes its toll on you, I remember when Gary Roberts Jr. had hair. Congratulations, Gary. Proud of you, bud.
Jack, thank you so much. Good comedy there. I love it. Great working with you too, and thanks for your involvement over decades and decades for the whole city. Thank you.
Pleasure.
And Gary,
Thank you,
before
pal.
I turn it
Enjoy.
over to Miss, before I give it to Miss Scipio and then the staff for any comments, I would like to thank you. You've had many accolades regarding your business acumen, but I admire you for your faith. I remember coming into this position and replacing a legend who served as our chair for so many years. And the first day I became chair, you pulled me to the side and you so graciously said, "Hey, do you mind if I have a word of prayer with you?" And it caught me off guard, but I will never forget that. I've shared that story with so many people, how in a time where the world seems to be divided, that faith still pulls us together. So not only your professional accolades, but your personal life speaks for itself. Congratulations. Thank you for what you've meant to me. And I'm sure our paths will cross on Sundays every now and again.
Yes. Thank you so much, Chris. You're welcome. It looks like God heard that prayer. You've done a great job, and it's been an honor to work with you as well.
Thank you so very kindly. Councilmember Scipio.
Thank you. What a wonderful surprise to hear that Gary has left the city for a new phase in his life. Gary, I just remember you, and I will tell you this, I know it's public, but whenever you made presentations to the council, I really listened. It was something about your tone of voice, your spirit was so authoritative. I didn't have to question anything that came out of your mouth. I love that because I knew whatever you said was accurate and true. You have a sweet, sweet spirit. And that's what people love, is that sweet, sweet, undeniable spirit. Though you are moving from the city, you call it retirement, that's not what we do. The city was just a season. You're going to another season in your life because retiring means you're sleeping, and that's not what you're about. You're all about a new season and doing some marvelous work. Not sure what it's going to be, but we'll all see it in time. So I wish you well. I wish you every blessing that God has in store for you, because you're so very deserving.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Scipio. I really appreciate your very kind words and your sweet spirit too. Haven't gotten to know you as well as some of the planning board members, but we're thankful for your service, and thank you so much for your words and your encouragement. And yes, retirement's not really a biblical concept. It's just kind of a term we put on it, but moving to a new phase, that's correct. So yes, it's been, just briefly, I know you're got a lot on the agenda or kind of behind, but it's been an honor to work with all of you planning board members so much. You've made our jobs easy. We look forward to the meetings, believe it or not. It's always a challenge. And the staff has been wonderful. As Aaron said 3 or 4 years ago, we have an amazing staff. And so I feel like I've developed as a person professionally and personally over these 21 years. A lot of grace has been given me, and I've during the ups and downs, but I've really enjoyed it, appreciated it, grown. Chris Murphy, you've been there the whole time, just about, and I really appreciated your friendship as well. And I have missed working with each one of you, and but you know, we go through seasons, so we're still friends. Thank you so much. And Jack, I remember talking to you at the counter one time about I was haranguing about cul-de-sacs or something, and I said, Charlotte doesn't even allow cul-de-sacs anymore over 250 feet. And he said, oh, excuse me, I didn't think this was Charlotte. But one thing I tried to keep in mind, and as far as battling crepe myrtles and cul-de-sacs, was a little wonderful passage here in Hebrews from the Word of God, very short, Hebrews chapter 13, verse 14, just kind of helped me to keep perspective a little bit. For here we do not have a lasting city, but we are looking forward to the city which is to come. So that kind of keeps things in perspective, but all knowing that we need to keep battling for good, sustainable development, compact, mixed use, walkable, with plenty of good shade trees. But thank you all so very much. I wish you the best. And if there's anything I can ever do, please feel free to give me a ring.
Thank you so very much, sir. A round of applause for a job well done.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, that was exciting. Now we would get back to the agenda. Our first order of business today will be the consent agenda. These are items for which the petitioner is requesting withdrawal or continuance, or items for which staff has recommended approval and no one has signed up to speak in opposition. For our public hearings today, each side will have a total of 12 minutes. There is no rebuttal period. Once you have been recognized by the board, staff will unmute your microphone so that you can provide your comments after the public hearing is closed and the board goes into work session. No one is permitted to speak unless the planning board is questioned. Again, the items under section B of our agenda will require final approval by the elected body, either the city council or county commissioners. As such, votes taken today are recommendations which are considered by the city council or board of commissioners during this review. Our first item of business is the approval of the minutes of the January 13th and January 27th meeting. Are there any additions or corrections? Is there a motion?
Move approval, Mr. Chairman. Clarence.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any further discussion? Mr. Murphy, if you could please call the roll.
George Bryan,
Yes.
Melinda Dunnigan,
Yes.
Walter Farabee,
Yes.
Jason Grubbs,
Yes.
Clarence Lamb,
Yes.
Chris Leak,
Yes.
Mo McCray,
Yes.
Brenda Smith,
Yes.
and Jack Steelman. You're muted.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, I'm now going to recognize Mr. Desmond Corley for our consent agenda today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. I will start by sharing my screen and then asking if you all are able to see the presentation.
Yes.
All right, so this first case is W3415. This is one that was continued twice, and it actually is a bit unique in the sense that typically we don't present items for which staff recommends denial on the consent agenda. However, as I mentioned, this request has been continued a couple of times to this point, and it has to move forward based on our ordinance provisions. The petitioner did not submit a site plan that's compliant with the UDO requirements, nor did they conduct the necessary neighborhood outreach after their request changed. So staff and the board are kind of obligated to recommend denial of this petition for failing to meet the UDO requirements for rezoning petitions. So the staff recommendation is for denial.
Thank you. Is there anyone here to speak on this case, Mr. Murphy?
Mr. Chairman, no, there's no one who has signed up again, but I'm not sure because we have allowed a number of folks in. If there's anyone who is here to speak on this case, if you could unmute yourself and just let us know. Whenever I did a search earlier, I didn't see anybody.
Okay.
Hearing none.
Hearing no one, I'm going to close the public hearing. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence. I move that the planning board find that the request is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan.
Motion by Mr. Lamb,
Second.
second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? Murphy, would you please call the roll?
George Bryan,
Yes.
Melinda Dunnigan,
Yes.
Walter Farabee,
Yes.
Jason Grubbs,
Yes.
Clarence Lamb,
Yes.
Chris Leak,
Yes.
Mo McCray,
Yes.
Brenda Smith,
Yes.
Jack Steelman.
Yes.
And Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence again. I further move that the planning board recommend denial of W3415.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubb. Any discussion? Mr. Murphy, would you please call the roll?
George Bryan,
Yes.
Melinda Dunnigan,
Yes.
Walter Farabee,
Yes.
Jason Grubbs,
Yes.
Clarence Lamb,
Yes.
Chris Leak,
Yes.
Mo McCray,
Yes.
Brenda Smith,
Yes.
Jack Steelman.
Yes.
All right, Mr. Chairman, that recommendation is unanimous for denial.
Sorry about that. The next item on the consent agenda is B2, which is case F1612. This is a petition to rezone 11.18 acres from AG to RS9S. This property is on the north side of Ogden School Road, west of Davis Ridge Road. Here is the proposed site plan for what's called Montero North. The subject property is in GMA 3 and has access to public water. Public sewer is available further north of the site, and they have proposed a private lift station that's going to pump to that main. The request is consistent with the proposed land use map for low density residential development. Their proposed density is 2.32 units per acre. This property or this proposal is adjacent to a Kernersville zoning district designated for traditional neighborhood development, and that has more traditional lotting pattern, smaller lots, and allows for mixed uses. One other thing that I will add for the benefit of the board, this property is within the lower Abbots Creek water supply watershed. It has to meet one of 3 criteria for development. The applicable criteria in this case is that the total proposed built upon area will be under 24%. Since their proposed built upon area is just under that threshold, erosion control staff is recommending this condition that you see on the slide to have the developer check in at regular intervals with the built upon area at the 25% build out, 50%, 75%, and total build out points of development. So staff is supportive of this request for the reasons stated previously, and we recommend approval. I'm glad to answer any questions.
Can I ask you a question, Mr. Corley?
Sure.
How do you define built upon area?
Built upon area is generally defined as the impervious surfaces on a particular property. So driveways, the building footprints themselves, those types of things are considered built upon area.
Well, how can you determine that in advance of building the project if you don't have a footprint for the building?
They have a typical footprint, I believe, that they provided, and Matt Osborne with erosion control is on the call, so he may be able to speak more directly to this. But generally speaking, there's a typical footprint that the developer proposes, which contains a certain amount of built upon area that would be typical for each of the lots in the proposal, and that is kind of multiplied across all of the lots that are proposed.
Okay, all right, that makes sense. One other question, and it relates to the town of Kernersville's comments regarding the road improvements from Caleb's Creek development. I just wasn't clear. I mean, it was a kind of a vague statement, and I just wasn't clear what the concern was about that. Can you elaborate a little bit?
Sure. I think the concern was not so much a concern, but a question of how is this development going to impact proposed projects or improvements as a result of the Caleb's Creek development. We reached out to NCDOT staff, let them know that Kernersville had that question. Their response was that this development or this proposed development wouldn't have any significant impacts on the improvements that are being proposed for the Caleb's Creek development.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dunnigan. Any additional questions for Mr. Corley or staff? Mr. Murphy, is there anyone here to speak on this case?
Mr. Chairman, again, I'm not aware of anyone that has signed up in opposition to this case. There is opposition to the companion case, F-1613 on the south side. So we will have a hearing on that, but no one has signed up in opposition to the one on the north side. But again, I will ask if anyone is opposed to F-1612, the 26 lot project on the north side of Ogden School Road, if you would unmute yourself and let us know. Like I said, I've not seen anyone signed up for it.
Okay, then I'm going to close the public hearing if I'm not hearing anyone. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence. I move that the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? Murphy, would you please call the roll?
George Bryan,
Yes.
Melinda Dunnigan,
Yes.
Walter Farabee,
Yes.
Jason Grubbs,
Yes.
Clarence Lamb,
Yes.
Chris Leak,
Yes.
Mo McCray,
Yes.
Brenda Smith,
Yes.
Jack Steelman.
Yes.
And Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence again. I move that the planning board recommend approval of F-1612 along with the highlighted condition.
I have a motion by Mr.
Second.
Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? Mr. Murphy, would you please call the roll?
George Bryan,
Yes.
Melinda Dunnigan,
Yes.
Walter Farabee,
Yes.
Jason Grubbs,
Yes.
Clarence Lamb,
Yes.
Chris Leak,
Yes.
Mo McCray,
Yes.
Brenda Smith,
Yes.
and Jack Stillman.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, that recommendation is unanimous for approval.
Thank you. Mr. Corley?
Desmond, you might be muted. Or maybe you're just trying to get to it.
There we go. Sorry. I was trying to navigate to the next item because the two items after that are going to have public hearings. We have people signed up to speak in opposition. So the next item on the consent agenda is B5. This is a final development plan for docket W 1714. This is a self-storage on Haynes Mill Road on 5.34 acres, the south side of Haynes Mill Road, just west of Brassfield Drive. Here is the proposed site plan and elevations for this development. So I guess I'll just remind the planning board at this point, it's a final development plan. The planning board has approval authority here, so you won't be making two motions, you'll just be making one. But to my knowledge, this is the first storage use proposed since the city council and the board of commissioners adopted the new standards that distinguished internal and external access for storage buildings. This plan and these elevations do meet those standards. So staff is supportive of this request and recommends approval of it. I'm glad to answer any questions.
Yes, Mr. Corley. Just had a question about the traffic generation. Here, you have under, says proposed use of storage services retail, 3,237.5 trips per day. That seems awfully high to me, and I'm just wondering, is that, why would you expect that many trips?
You're right. That looks weird to me too.
It's not right.
Yeah, I think the math is bad here. That's an error on our part. I apologize.
Well, I don't know. I would swear that's supposed to be divided by 10,000 and not 1,000 because, let's see.
So it might be 30 trips a day.
Yeah, there's, it's not.
Desmond, this is Jeff with Winston-Salem DOT. Do you want me to respond?
Sure.
So, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. 3,000 trips is not right. Just some clarity, as you heard, that trip generation for storage facilities are always really low. And so you can notice the number of parking spaces. So the trip generation for this, I'm not sure the exact square footage, but I just want to make the comment that number is not accurate.
The decimal place is in the wrong place. The actual number is 323.75.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's better. Thank you.
Good catch. And we'll make sure to correct that before council.
Right. Apologies.
All right. Are there any other questions? Thank you for catching that, Ms. Dunnigan.
Mr. Chairman, just as a reminder, this will stop at the planning board. So this is not a recommendation for approval. This is for approval.
Right. What's the motion of the board?
Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence. I move that the planning board approve the final development plan for W 1714.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? Mr. Murphy, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Bryan.
Yes.
Ms. Dunnigan.
Yes.
Mr. Farabee.
Yes.
Mr. Grubbs.
Yes.
Mr. Lamb.
Yes.
Mr. Leak.
Yes.
Ms. McCray.
Yes.
Ms. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Stillman.
Yes.
All right, Mr. Chairman, that is approved unanimously.
All right, the last item on the consent agenda is C1. This is a subdivision by the name of Lavender Hill. It proposes 10 lots on 3.7 acres on the west side of North Peace Haven Road, south of Aquadale Lane. Here is the proposed site plan for Lavender Hill. You can see that the 10 lots are arranged in a traditional kind of manner around this cul-de-sac Passion Court. This site plan is compliant with the UDO requirements, and so staff recommends approval of the request.
Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence. I move approval.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs.
A question.
Yes, Mr. Bryant.
Mr. Corley, this land slopes backwards from the road or downwards away from the road. When you look at the pattern of the water, should the neighbors expect runoff to be coming through their yards in this particular case, or have there been accommodations?
There shouldn't be any additional runoff. I mean, the stormwater ordinance is going to require at least the quantity to be the same as it is existing. To my knowledge, the petitioner or the developer has worked out a sort of a alternative stormwater control measure down there in the southwestern corner to kind of slow down the flow of the runoff that will leave this site after it leaves the stormwater control measure. So
where will it leave that stormwater pond?
It looks like this is the outlet. Can you see my cursor?
Yeah, what is that? What does that represent? Is that a marsh? I don't know what the
more than likely riprap. That would be
okay.
Yeah, and it basically discharges at that point, and then if you'll notice on the neighboring property, James and Patricia Smith, there's a yard inlet.
Okay,
there. So I'm
okay.
assuming it will go at the pre-development discharge rate there, and then get into another storm drain system.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question as well, just to piggyback on what Mr. Bryan said. Mr. Fogarty notes in his comments that he has a concern about the discharge point from this system. And he says that there appears to be a low spot in the neighboring yard where all of this off-site and site runoff will collect. So my question is, has that issue been addressed and corrected, or is that still an issue that remains to be considered?
It has been addressed by what we were just talking about. That comment was made before they submitted a revised plan.
Okay.
Yeah, the original plan showed something different.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second on the floor. Now, Mr. Murphy, would you please call the roll?
George Bryan?
Yes.
Melinda Dunnigan?
Yes.
Walter Farabee?
Yes.
Jason Grubbs?
Yes.
Clarence Lamb?
Yes.
Chris Leak?
Yes.
Mo McCray?
Yeah.
Brenda Smith?
Yes.
Jack Steelman? You're muted, Mr. Steelman.
Yes, I apologize.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman of the Board, that subdivision is approved unanimously, and at this point we will go back to the first public hearing item, which is B3 F1613. Desmond, I'm not sure who's handling that case.
It's going to be Amy McBride.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. This is zoning case F1613, and the petitioners are requesting special use rezoning from AG to RS15S. As you can see, this is the Legacy Growth Management Plan. The site is located in the southeast portion of the county. It is within GMA3 suburban neighborhoods. This is the location map, and you can see the subject site shown in yellow. In areas of green, that's the notification areas that were sent out. The area north across Ogden School Road that's denoted in red is jurisdiction for town of Kernersville. And this is an aerial view of the existing conditions. And you can see it's kind of a mix of farmland, hardwoods. This is a picture of the site looking west. This is on Ogden School Road. The subject property is on the left side of the road. And if you'll note, there's a separate zoning sign on the right side. That's the case that you just heard. That was on consent. That is the north portion. This case is the south that will be on the left side of the road. This is a picture looking down Ogden School Road towards the east. This photo was taken at what will be the main entrance of the subdivision as you would be turning out towards the right. This picture, again, at the main entrance, looking west, the section that you see before you is actually the portion of this development for the southern side. This is looking down west towards Ogden School Road. Subject property is on the left-hand side, and this is about the middle portion of the development. This is looking east down Ogden School Road. This is the proposed secondary entrance for the subdivision that I was standing at. So it would be turning right out of the subdivision. And if you'll note, there's an existing church across the street. And again, this is also at that same secondary entrance looking west towards the left, and the limits of the project are just up where the road starts to crest up there. And this is the area plan map. If you can see, the areas denoted in yellow are proposed for low density single family. There is a larger portion shown in pink that is Kernersville's jurisdiction. That area is zoned TND. It allows for the same density as what our area plan recommends, but also has some mixed use development. And then the church that I previously noted in the photo, that's shown in blue, labeled as institution. And this is the proposed site plan. So we have a total of 218 lots that are being proposed. This is a density of 2.57 units per acre, which meets the area plan recommendation. Low density for the area plan is 0 to 5 units per acre. So you can see they're right sort of in the middle of that. There are two proposed entrances that I had noted in before at the pictures. Both go onto Ogden School Road. As Kernersville's jurisdiction is across the street, we did reach out to them for any comments, and I think that was noted by Mr. Corley that they had some concerns at just what the future road improvements for Caleb's Creek and how this would impact that. The NCDOT reached back out, and basically they said that both phases of Monteria should not significantly be affected for those developments, that they anticipate that the majority of the residents will choose to use Ogden School Road and NC 66. So NCDOT didn't have a lot of concerns about that. The development is also within, I'm sorry, could we go back one? One quite finished. The development is within the Abbotts Creek watershed. There are 3 options for being able to meet that. One would be a minimum lot size, at least 20,000 square feet. Second is average density to not exceed 2 units per 40,000 square feet, or that the proposed built upon area shall not exceed 24%. For this, they are utilizing that third option. Their proposed built upon area is coming in at 23.65%. And as they are so close to that threshold, the staff is recommending, again, the same condition that you had seen before with the north, that there be reports and that the developer provide erosion control staff regular build out reports at 25% completion, 50%, and then 75, as well as an as-built survey of the overall percentage when the development's been completed. And I believe we have Matthew Osborne, our staff with erosion control, that can speak with you about any additional concerns with that. Also to note with the site, public water is available. Public sewer is not, but the developer will be providing private sewers. And in summary, the request is consistent with the low density residential plan that the area plan recommends. It's within GMA 3, has access to public water, and the site is served by Ogden School Road, which is a minor thoroughfare with ample capacity. So staff recommends approval, and the site plan currently meets all UDO requirements. Are there any additional questions? I'm happy to answer.
Yes, Ms. McBride, this is Clarence. Sure. What is the enforcement provision with the condition on the interim inspections, the 25, 50, and 75? You just stop issuing building permits? Is that the remedy?
I think if Matthew could jump on and maybe mention us, he's erosion control, and that would be his department.
Yeah, hello, members of the board. My name's Matthew Osborne. I'm the erosion control program manager. Desmond and I spoke about that exact question, the way in which to enforce that condition. And yes, you're correct. It would be a scenario where we would track building permit issuance, and once they approach those approximate build outs, we would start requesting those reports from the developer. And if they failed to do so, we would cease issuing building permits until that condition was met.
Okay, then how would they go about meeting the condition then? So they start building smaller houses or shorter driveways, or does that require a site plan amendment? I want to walk through the enforcement.
So they submitted a conceptual site plan that shows streets, sidewalks, house footprints, other things like that, and that come up with a total of the 23.65% that Amy mentioned. So what we would be looking for as we look at these build out reports is to make sure that, that they're hitting their targets, and that we're not going to be down to the 75 towards the 100 and they're way over and they still have a number of lots to build and they've, exceeded it. Because the concern is some of these cul-de-sac lots that are larger, they're using a standard house and driveway footprint in their calculations. And some of these lots are larger. And, if they, go with a different model house or a longer driveway or something like that, those numbers can change, based on the conceptual development at this stage. So that's why we've asked for the build out reports, just to make sure they're operating in good faith to comply with the Abbott's Creek watershed protection regulations.
I probably didn't answer my question correctly then. The question I have is, let's say that they get to the 50% mark and all of a sudden they're not on pace. They're over. Mm-hmm. They're over on their impervious. All right. Mm-hmm. Now what happens? They stop getting building permits, but what do they do? What do they have to do? Make their the house footprint smaller, make the drive shorter, come in for a site plan amendment? What do they have to do?
So the important target really would be the 75 to as built. That's where, if there's any corrections that need to be made, they're gonna, if they go over and they get towards the end of the project, they're probably going to end up losing some lots. Okay. They won't be able to build them. They'll have to just stabilize them with vegetation and leave them undeveloped.
Okay, that's the solution. All right, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Can I follow up on that? How far into the future is this monitored? If people begin living there and then put storage buildings, extra garages on their lots. This is so close to that 25%. When does that trip over? How does the county monitor this into the future?
So the good thing is erosion control staff also has reviews on those exact kind of permits, accessory buildings, pools. So, and we've also communicated to the developer that they need to be making their HOA aware of these built upon area restrictions for the future homeowners. And we will track it as far as, not issuing permits for those kind of additional developments on the lot by lot basis when the homeowners take over and want to do additional things.
Okay, and it is going to be an HOA. Okay, thank you.
I assume.
Yes, okay.
I had a question, I guess for Ms. McBride about the site plan. I was wondering, the entrance on Ogden School Road, the main entrance, does it align with the entrance for the northern development as well? Is there?
It does. I mean, I don't have a visual to show you that, but it does.
Okay, and there will be a left and right turn lane for the southern development, but not the northern?
Right. That is a condition that we are requesting for, let me pull that up real quick for this one. And I believe it is the same for the other development. Maybe not right turn lane. Let me get back with you on that. I've got that in our conditions.
Melinda, this is Desmond. You're right that there are no turn lanes required on the north side. There are turn lanes required for the southern development.
Okay, but the two entrances will be opposite each other.
Correct.
Okay.
All right. Any additional questions for staff?
I do. This is Brenda. I'm just looking at, we've got the two cases and I understand wanting these build out reports. With it being in the Abbott's Creek watershed, is there anything in that protection plan that talks about doing these additional build out reports? Is this something we're going to do for anything that's close to this, using this kind of standard?
So we've done these build out reports before, specifically in the Salem Lake watershed. We've had some developments that we've used this same tact with in the past.
Okay.
No, there isn't anything specifically in the ordinance with that exact language, but there is language about basically any documentation that's needed to verify compliance can be requested.
Okay, I'm just looking for consistency in how we're applying this and when we're applying this. And if so it's being applied in these special conditioned water supply watersheds or just the watershed protection areas? How is that?
So this would be, yes, for developments in protected water supply watershed areas would be the only time this kind of a condition comes up.
Right.
And the main reason for these two is because they only could comply by the total built upon area provision, and they're complying, and it's so close. It's close to the maximum.
It's very close.
Whereas a lot of developments have enough land area that they don't approach that maximum threshold as much as this one is.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if there's no additional questions for staff, I'm now going to turn it over to Mr. Murphy because I think we're going to have a public hearing. So I'm going to open the public hearing, Mr. Murphy, and turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Basically, we have one person who has signed up in opposition, and he admittedly is, I'll let him classify exactly what he is whenever he gets on here. He has concerns, but he's not necessarily opposed. So with that, I'm not sure if Greg Garrett or Vince Townsend, the engineer, I'm not sure who wants to lead off, but I'll turn it over to the proponents And if you would, just whoever's going to go first, just remember whenever you unmute yourself, state your name, address, and zip code for the record before you begin your remarks.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the board. My name is Greg Garrett, and I'm a development consultant for Schubert Homes and the property owner of the subject property. Actually, 3 of the property owners are in attendance today. I'm joined by Mr. Phil McCracken, Mrs. Elizabeth White, and Tracy Nichols, also known as Tracy's iPhone on your screen. So we're all proponents, and then I also have our civil engineer on the meeting as well, Vince Townsend, and he'll be able to answer any technical questions you guys might have. We have been working with your planning staff for several months on this project, and I'm really excited about what's before you this evening. It is a little bit unusual with the impervious surface, but we have actually had a lot of experience with keeping track of the built upon area in our developments, and quite frankly am pleased that you guys are going to be proactive monitoring that as well, because it's something that we will be monitoring very closely. We do fully understand the impact if we all of a sudden start building bigger houses than what was planned, that we can end up short lots at the end. So that's something that we're going to keep a very close eye on. So in addition to spending several months with the planning staff, I've also spent a lot of time meeting neighbors out there because, you know, COVID still has things very awkward to figure out how to meet safely. I have taken the approach of calling every immediate property owner that actually joins the property, tracking down their phone number and reaching out and listening to their concerns and sharing information. And I'm pleased to say that for the most part, everyone understood that the property was going to be sold, and that you know, there would be a development. You know, being in the heart of the triad, everyone kind of knows that area is changing drastically. However, I did spend some extensive time with the Howells and made quite a few adjustments to the plans based on some of their concerns. And I know that they're in attendance as well. And you know, I'm very sympathetic to their situation, and we'll continue to work with them to figure out just a way to hopefully improve their situation. You know, I'm not going to, you know, maybe I'll let them speak for themselves, but just a quick summary is there's already some stormwater concerns that exist there when the land is totally vacant and vegetated. So I think that's why they're just extra concerned about the stormwater aspect. And to share with you what we did do to try to help that situation is, you know, in addition to keeping our impervious surface under 24%, we have also left stormwater detention ponds on the plan. And so that is not something that's required in this watershed. And but we, knowing that there's been a problem and talking to them, they're the one that alerted me to the issue. We have 2 stormwater detention ponds on the plan that is planned to receive a majority of the runoff. I can't say it's a total all the runoff, but the majority of the runoff will go into those ponds, be held in the ponds, and then released slowly out of the ponds. So that was something we did to try to help that situation. And then we've also, we had more development up against their property line, and we've done some revisions to leave a lot of open space up against their property. So, you know, like I said, we'll continue to work with them, but I do feel that we've done quite a bit to try to address their concern. And so I mean, I could go over the merits of the property, but since we just have the house on the line, I would just briefly just point out a couple of attributes of the project. So it's, you know, it's only 2.5 lots per acre. Our open space, and this is really important, our open space is over double the required open space. So your requirement's 15%, and we're providing 31.7% open space. You know, we're doing ribbon pavement roads and ditches, so that really cuts back on the amount of runoff, and quite frankly is what helped us be able to continue to have a certain number of houses to make the project, you know, feasible for us. The homes are going to be sized anywhere from 1,800 to 3,000 square feet. And of course, most of them will be two-story homes, which is because I know if you're thinking about the math, if it's a 3,000 square foot ranch, then you know, you quickly exceed your built upon average per home. So you know, we're, like I said, we're just very aware of that and keeping a very close eye on that. And so I think just, you know, in closing, I would just like to say, I believe the staff has done a fabulous job pointing out the findings of fact for support of this case. And I hope you agree with them. I'm happy to answer any questions. I would like to introduce you to Mr. Phil McCracken, who is one of the main property owners for the property, the subject property. I think he has a few remarks to share.
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, appreciate the opportunity. My address is 3520 Honeywood Drive, Johnson City, Tennessee, zip code 37604. The property has been in the family, the best we can tell, since 1884, when our great-grandfather, John Bodenheimer, bought at least a portion of that property.
Yeah.
Our grandmother was married in 1921, and they moved into that house with John Bodenheimer's son, Edgar, who was our grandfather. This Ogden School was built in 1885, and the Ogden name came from a man who moved from up north, as they put it, and he wanted the school named after him if he donated the library. So that's what happened. In 1929, our grandmother actually bought Ogden School and the property that was on. We've been paying taxes on the property for a number of years. Heirs range from as close as Winston-Salem to as far as Tucson, Arizona. We're currently up to 14 heirs, and we just feel like it's a good time to sell the property to especially a reputable buyer like the Clayton Properties Group.
Mr. Chairman, there's approximately 4 minutes left. You know, I think Mr. Townsend is on here to answer any engineering questions. The only other person that was signed up as a proponent is Tracy Nichols. I'm not sure if anyone else wants to speak, but like I said, we have about 4 minutes left.
All right. Would anyone else like to speak? Okay. All right. So, Mr. Murphy, I'll turn it over to you to go to the.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we do have one person signed up in opposition, and that's Thomas Hollowell. If you would, just unmute yourself, state your name and address and zip code for the record, and begin your remarks.
Hi, this is actually Jennifer Hollowell. My husband, Thomas, and I live at 175 Carvey Smith Road in Kernersville, and the zip code is 27284. And we just appreciate the opportunity to voice our concerns to the planning board, and thank you for listening to us. one of our major concerns is the water runoff from this property that goes through a creek into an adjoining property and impacts the road that we live on. There are several homes. We have actually sent some pictures of like major rain, like a major rainfall and what that can do, on the road. So, that was just one of our concerns about this property in the sensitive nature of the water coming through. Also just impact on property values of our home, changing from the rural setting. And then I know that this was addressed before, that they didn't really see that this development was going to have a big impact on Ogden School Road. But from someone who lives out in this area, the development is putting a lot of pressure on the roads out here. And we have seen close calls where traffic is backing up, Ogden School Road and 66, if you go on down to Teague Lane and to Watkins Ford Road and High Point Road and Watkins Ford Road and 66, where people are having to take chances just to, there are no stoplights. So, they're having to take chances to finally, keep going on their way. There's still farmers and tractors and heavy machinery using the property. So we don't necessarily want to stop progress, but we just don't see any improvements being done to the roads, at this point to handle the volume on that. But as Greg Garrett mentioned, he's been very willing to talk to us. He did rework some of the plan. We really appreciate that. And we just want to make sure that, all of those things that were discussed about, using ditches rather than curbs and gutters, the retention ponds, having more green space, having the ribbon roads, really, remain a priority and a requirement of this development, as well as if we can possibly keep some existing trees in the buffer area, along our lines. And there's some really nice old oaks, actually all throughout their property, but, on our line as well. So like I said, we do appreciate, the attention that Greg has given to our concerns. So, and then also, we have a small local fire department at the end of Watkins Ford Road. There's a lot of development. I know there's the Beeson's Cross Road, fire department, but, just with the planning in the development of this area, it seems like those things are not keeping up, with all of the building that's being done. And I think that's all we have to say.
Mr. Chairman, there's approximately 8.5 minutes left. Again, there was no one else that was signed up in opposition. But again, I'll just open it up since there were a number of folks that probably came on after and we weren't able to do signups. If there's anyone here in opposition, if you would please unmute yourself and state your name, address, and zip code for the record if there's any additional opposition. I'm not hearing any, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, well, seeing no additional opposition, I'm now going to declare the public hearing closed. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, could I ask a question before we have a motion?
Yes, you may.
It's just based on the issue about traffic. I just wanted some further clarification. I know we've heard the DOT is not concerned about the issue that Kernersville had brought up, but in the staff report, it mentioned something about a roundabout that was anticipated to fail at Teague Road and Ogden School. I wasn't clear about the consequences of that. Can we hear a little bit more from NCDOT about that?
NCDOT is not on here that I'm aware of, but Jeff Fansler with Winston-Salem DOT, who of course, that as part of review, MPO, other things, I mean, that I believe they are familiar with this. So I'll see if Jeff has any response to kind of what the TIA said and kind of the information that was discussed about the roundabout at Teague and Ogden.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Murphy, and good evening again, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, and good evening, Ms. Dunnigan. I'll do my best to answer your questions. You did notice correctly. So this is a complicated scenario, and I'll be real brief in my response to try to paint the picture. The Caleb's Creek development, along with that, there was a lot of improvements and kind of commitments that would take place on Teague Road. That does include a roundabout at Ogden School. And what the Caleb's Creek connector, the Caleb's Creek development project would do would open up a fourth leg of the intersection. And in the peak hour, upon full build out of everything, we do have some challenges with that one because it was only expected to be a single lane roundabout. Now, what you've heard tonight is that we have coordinated a lot with NCDOT on this. And there's some unknowns about timing, about full build out scenarios, and really what the final scenarios would be. We don't know. What we've modeled and what's built today, aren't the same, right? And so we don't, and what's on the docket to be built and what we know is coming, we don't have a clear picture of. So trying to understand all this is complicated, but in a nutshell, this site specific, what we did when we scoped the traffic analysis was we asked that they model worst case, right? So we modeled basically all of Caleb's Creek development. We modeled the roundabout, full build out, which is expected, and the developer may correct me, but I believe we had modeled 2029. So several years of background growth and just trying to get the worst case of traffic to be modeled and understand what's going on. And as I mentioned, with the roundabout scenario and the improvements that are to be built with the Caleb's Creek development, there is some challenges that are expected to be transparent at that roundabout. NCDOT is aware. I think that's part of our work with coordinating this with NCDOT to make the improvements as efficient as we can. If there's any design modifications or if there's any elements of the improvements that we can adjust to address those scenarios. But to be clear, this site is not doesn't propose as many homes. That there was just about 230, I thought, if my memory serves me, trips in the peak hour, which is PM peak. That was the worst hour that we expect. And that traffic was modeled to be displaced, like was mentioned earlier, kind of both ways towards NC 66 and towards Teague Road. So there's a what we call a trip distribution split where we're not further burdening a problem. So the model did indicate it's pretty balanced with the way traffic would navigate both directions. So all things being considered, in addition to the turn lane requirements that are a requirement of this development, our conversation with NCDOT at this time, we felt there was nothing else we could ask of this developer. And we have to do our job through the next few years of making sure that the improvements at Teague Lane are designed and built to handle growth in the area. So that's a long, complicated answer. I'm not sure it does the job for you, but that's what we know now. There are just some unknowns with what will be once everything is fully built out. We still need to hash out.
But you're still planning the roundabout at Teague and Ogden School.
That is still the plan. What we know is that we don't know when that will actually be constructed.
Okay. Thank you.
Any additional questions? All right, pleasure. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence. I move that the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? Murphy, would you please call the roll?
George Bryan,
Yes.
Melinda Dunnigan,
Yes.
Walter Farabee,
Yes.
Jason Grubbs,
Yes.
Clarence Lamb,
Yes.
Chris Leak,
Yes.
Mo McCray,
Yes.
Brenda Smith,
Yes.
Jack Steelman.
Yes.
And Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence again. I move that the planning board recommend approval of F1613.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? Murphy, would you please call the roll?
George Bryan,
Yes.
Melinda Dunnigan,
Yes.
Walter Farabee,
Yes.
Jason Grubbs,
Yes.
Clarence Lamb,
Yes.
Chris Leak,
Yes.
Mo McCray,
Yes.
Brenda Smith,
Yes.
Jack Stillman.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman of the Board, that recommendation is unanimous for approval to the county commissioners. Well, next, we'll have the next public hearing item, which is item B4, and that's case W3515.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I'll certainly try to do as well as Gary Roberts does on these. And of course, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. This is case W3515. It's approximately a 13.11 acre site located on the north and south sides of West Mill Road at its western terminus. Petitioners are requesting a special use rezoning from RS9 to RM12S. You can see on the Legacy Growth Management Plan, this is located in GMA2, urban neighborhoods. And this is the location map. You can see the property is bisected by the right-of-way for West Mill Road. It's bounded by I-40 bypass on the southwest, and then there's actually an exit going around, going to eastbound Salem Parkway. And then on the eastern side, that's bounded by primarily RS9 zone property. And to the north, there's a medical office in the GOS portion there. You can see a little bit further to the east there on Westbrook Plaza Drive, there's a number of other GOS zone properties. This is the 2018 aerial. Not much has changed since this aerial was taken. The site is largely undeveloped and largely wooded. There are 2 single family homes located on the site. This is looking west along West Mill Road towards the site. Can't see too much there. Again, it's heavily wooded. Next slide. And this is looking the other direction, east along West Mill Road. The site is behind the viewpoint there. Next slide. It's a little bit further back along West Mill Road, just to give you a little more perspective. The end of that sidewalk is in the GOS zone portion, and the northern portion of the proposed rezoning there is right where the trees are at across that driveway. Next slide. This is on the southern end on Westbrook, so it's looking west. The site is located all the way in the back there behind that real estate sign. You can see Westbrook Drive curves to the south. That new drive there, that's where the NOL zone property is. Next slide. And this is just one more shot looking south on Westbrook. The site is to the right there, and you can see that Westbrook dead ends. Next slide. One last shot here. This is looking east at the intersection of Westbrook Drive and Westbrook Plaza Drive. You can actually take a right there and get on Westbrook Plaza Drive, and then weave your way to Haynes Mill Boulevard from that intersection. Next slide. This is the Southwest Suburban Area Plan land use recommendation map, and you can see it does recommend offices at this location. Next slide. Actually, I'm sorry, go back. I just want to highlight something. I do want to point out that you can see some other higher density multifamily uses that do exist there. There's a retirement village there on Forest Gate Drive, another small apartment complex on the cul-de-sac there at Westgate Center Circle, and then one more further to the north on Healy Drive. Next slide. And this is the proposed site plan. You can see 6 multifamily buildings there, 3 on the left side and 3 on the right side of the proposed West Mill right-of-way. The petitioner is proposing a public through street connecting West Mill up with the intersection with Westbrook Drive to the south. There are 7 garage units, 4 on the right, 4 on the left. And then they have centrally located common open space with the proposed clubhouse and pool. And there is a proposed stormwater pond in the southeastern portion of the site. Next slide. These are the proposed building elevations. You can see they're 3-story buildings. It's 24 units in each building. I think they're all 2-bedroom proposed. Next slide. And these are the proposed garage elevations, very similar architecture and materials that they're proposing for those. Next slide. So in closing, staff did find that the proposed rezoning is in keeping with the larger goals of Legacy 2030, as this integrates different land uses within the serviceable area. The proposed rezoning would create a new public street that will provide additional connectivity in the immediate area. As mentioned, the site is located within the serviceable land area and does have is in close proximity to other services. And staff wanted to mention they have excellent multimodal interconnectivity with really good internal sidewalk connectivity, setting this up for other developments for future redevelopment. And staff did also want to mention that there has been a significant, at least in our experience, reduction in market demand for office park developments, especially in the wake of the global pandemic. Those events kind of substantiated the reevaluation of the office use, land use recommendation in the immediate area. I just kind of wanted to put that little note in there. And next slide. Staff does recommend approval of the rezoning request, and the site plan does meet UDO requirements. Be happy to answer any questions.
I have a couple. So my first question is, if they're all 2 bedrooms, I'm assuming it's family, and because this is office, like it was proposed office in Legacy, has the developer reached out to the school district just to make sure that there's capacity for this many units? And then the other question was, there's 1 stormwater pond currently on site. Do they think that that's enough? And the last one is just its proximity to the highway. Is there any fencing proposed along the perimeter?
I can answer the last question. I would probably defer to Luke Dickey, the agent for the developer, on the first 2 questions. Fencing is not a requirement. They are showing a required thoroughfare overlay buffer yard, but no additional fencing, which is an ordinance requirement.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if you want us to call on the petitioners at this point, or just allow them to answer those questions whenever they.
Yeah.
I don't think the question on Miss McRae was still speaking.
No, I think that's it. I think the fencing is the only planning staff question. I'm sorry. Those are just off the top of my head that I've written down. So I can wait for the public hearing. No problem.
Mr. Bryan.
Yes. Now, the original use of this was for professional buildings, and there are a lot in that area. What would be the difference in trip generation between had that become office versus this being residential?
Looking at the staff report, the trip generation for this is around 958 trips per day, and the existing zoning is 603 for RS9. It would be difficult for me to tell you what the Geo Zoning is without, proposed Geo Zoning is without knowing what the square footage is of the buildings.
It would be office square footage dependent, on 13 acres. And again, and perhaps the petitioner's representative may be able to give a kind of good rule of thumb as far as office square footage per acre, but I imagine it would be comparable, if probably not a little bit more. Now, the difference would be that your trip distribution would be different, in that you're going to have more evenly spaced trips throughout the day, and you're going to have more weekend trips, obviously, because you're going to have someone there 24/7 versus an office environment where you're likely to be kind of 7 to 7 and very little weekends. So while it's the trips are probably comparable, if the office maybe probably even higher, again, you're going to have more of a continuous impact with multifamily than you are with office.
Okay, well, I'll probably have another question for Mr. Fansler after we go into public hearing.
And I would just add that going forward, I think it's reasonable to assume the trip generation from new office development is going to be declining, and we may need to update our method of calculating it, simply given the significant increase in the desire for working from home.
All right. Well, if there are no questions right now, I'm going to open up the public hearing at this point. Murphy, I will turn it over to you to call for the proponents.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We do have 4 folks who are signed up as proponents. We have 2 folks that are signed up as opponents. I'm going to make an assumption here that Mr. Dickey with Stillman Associates is going to take the lead, and then I'll let him kind of lead me after he's finished as to anyone else who may wish to speak. But with that, if you would just unmute yourself, state your name, address, and zip code for the record.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the board. My name is Luke Dickey with Stillman Associates, a site plan preparer. Address is 601 North Trade Street, Suite 200, Winston-Salem 27101. Also want to extend greetings to our distinguished guests of Councilmember Scipio and also Mr. Gary Roberts. I'm glad to finally get to see you one more time going through all of this. Brian did a fantastic job of basically stealing all my thunder of kind of what this presentation is. He kind of really went over everything really well. So go ahead and move to the next slide, please. Yeah, so what's being kind of key highlights, as mentioned, and working on this site plan, it is 6 buildings totaling 144 units, so under 12 units per acre. So that's why we're coming in for the RM12 request for zoning. We worked with staff on exactly how to have the public road go through the middle of the site for Vest Mill Road, and then its connection to Westbrook Drive. All the details haven't been worked out exactly on how that extension will integrate with Westbrook Drive, but that's just conceptual right there from what we worked out with Mr. Jeff Fansler from Winston-Salem DOT. More further details will be worked out, through the engineering and driveway permit process for this. In regards to the layout, then we do have the 3 buildings on each side of the extension of the Vest Mill Road. We will have to, of course, request closure of the existing right-of-way for Vest Mill, which kind of part of it is from NCDOT, and also part of it is on the city request as well. The area, of course, is with the central clubhouse and amenity areas, and kind of the garages will create kind of a buffer there on the eastern property boundary, with just kind of being a 1-story. That will shield all the internal kind of parking from that area. In regards to stormwater, we roughly size the stormwater at this phase. It's not fully engineered plans. Given that this site's got roughly a percentage of about 50%, 55% impervious area, we fully expect that we would be able to size that pond in that location, be able to handle that. And then that would discharge into actually that piece right there is actually owned by NCDOT, where we would actually discharge that out into a drainage swale in that location. Overall, as mentioned, just kind of going to the next slide, please. This kind of then just shows you where that existing Vest Mill Road kind of cuts through the property. That the end there, what's highlighted in red, that is actually what is NCDOT right-of-way. They have a deed on that. And then the yellow is what we would coordinate with the city of Winston-Salem for closure through that section. So we are preparing, we have a condition for the acquisition of the NCDOT portion prior to closing of the city right-of-way approval process. So we are working with them to go through that process. That's got to go all to Raleigh for them to review that. And we're working through that process right now. Next slide, please. Overall, what's highlighted is the properties that were within 500 feet or more towards Westbrook Plaza Drive. We sent out letters. Those were included in your packet. We did get 5 responses to date from adjacent property owners to that. Ms. Cosette Slamp is one of those as well, who's on this call, and Mr. Mark Golden had also reached out. We had also had discussions with the developer who did the professional business park there just on the north side of Vest Mill Road. We are actually, Stillman Associates was part of that project with the skin surgery center that went in that location. And I believe there's also been one other development along there. So as staff had pointed out, in this area, it's been very slow market for office development. That skin surgery center has been, I think it's maybe about 8 years now or so that's gone in with all that planning. And so no other of those other lots have really had any interest or development on that. But it's again, it's a slow market. We just see it getting slower for office in this area at the time. Next slide, please. So again, this request is compatible with adjacent residential and office development in the area. It does provide for additional residential options that has been slow to develop for office uses as recommended by the area plan. The proposed plan does provide great connectivity. It's basically replacing 2 dead-end streets right now. So basically, if you were to come on Westbrook Drive, you'd have to turn around and go back out the other way. Same thing with West Mill Road. There's nothing that interconnected this. It'll also help with city services through the area. The traffic generation for the project, while more than the current RS9 zoning, would be closer to what an office park would generate. As Mr. Murphy had mentioned in his comments in regards to that, we have roughly 13 acres. Overall, we could expect per acre to fit on the site if everything coursed out well is maybe about 12,000 square feet per acre from an office use with surface parking. So I don't have the exact numbers of what I can run, what that would be best from a traffic generation standpoint, but it would definitely be comparable. Other than the fact that Mr. Murphy is correct in when it comes to the traffic generation, it would be more dispersed throughout the day from a multifamily development, not all at the peak hours that you'd see coming in at office work time from people coming into the office and then leaving right at 5 o'clock. It'd be more distributed throughout the day. We did actually have a little traffic study done on this, just a letter, just kind of look at what those traffic generation would be. I know that was provided to Winston-Salem DOT as part of their kind of review. When we looked at it, it wasn't required to have a full TIA done on this one. Actually using the new trip generation summary for multifamily high-rise housing, the daily traffic actually came out to about 783 trips per day, so less than what is even in the staff report. And then this weekday kind of AM peak trips would be basically a total of 49 trips, so 13 entering and 36 exiting. And the higher one would be the PM peak when everybody's coming kind of back in from their work, be 38 entering and possibly 25 exiting. So even less than what is in the staff report at this time. At this point, I'd be happy to answer any questions. We also have representatives from the developer group, Mr. David Carr and Jake Capistrano, are also on the call that can answer any specific questions to the proposed development that they see. And then also, I believe we do have some of the property owners as well that may speak after me. And I thank you very much for your time this afternoon.
Mr. Chairman,
I'd just like to ask
ahead.
Mr.
Yeah.
About the thoroughfare buffer yard plantings adjacent to the 2 highways. Is that going to be a mix of evergreens and large variety trees, or can you expand a little bit on what's going to be there?
Yeah, so code requirements for that is, you have the large canopy trees, and then you infill that with understory evergreen plantings and shrubs as well. So it'll be there to meet the current code requirements. Also, of course, at this point, there's a lot of existing pines and evergreen trees within the actual right-of-way itself on that slope. So, we would be actually planting behind that, but, we can't rely on NCDOT keeping that planting there at all times. You'll notice that with the skin surgery center, when you're coming up Salem Parkway, you really can't see it packed in there because it's actually got all the existing evergreens along the slope there that screens that from the highway.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, Zeke, do you have any in the community outreach that they reached out to the schools? I'm assuming their market study showed that most of the occupancy would be coming from the local market. I just didn't know if that impacted the school enough to generate like some sort of condition.
Yeah, thank you. I neglected that. I wrote that down. I forgot to respond to that. I don't know if they have reached out to the schools in that regards. It's typically not something that's done during the zoning process because that's kind of a separate kind of issue from zoning requests. So I can't specifically answer that at this time unless Mr. Carr has done any of that. So.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Dickey, Was there any thought about any workforce affordability housing in exchange for the city abandoning their property within that area?
Mr. Bryan, no, there hasn't been any discussion like from that standpoint. These would be market rate. And I think one of the trade-offs would be the fact that we are providing a new public street connection to replace that connects all the way back to Westbrook Drive. And that would be on the developer to provide that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we do have approximately 6 minutes left of time. The next speaker who is signed up to speak as a proponent is David Carr. Mr. Carr, if you would unmute yourself, state your name, address, and zip code for the record.
David Carr. My address is 9334 Eden Grove Court, Louisville, North Carolina, 27023. I really don't have anything to say. I'm rather enjoying listening to you guys.
All right. The next person who signed up is Timothy Shove. If you would unmute yourself, state your name, address, and zip code for the record.
Timothy Michael Shove. My address is 5428 Hanover Park Drive, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, 27103. I'm representing as administrator and trustee of the Fally Myers Shove property located at 4100 Vest Mill Road. I'm also representing and speaking for the Albert Burt family who lives in Maryland, and they own 8 acres in the site plan, and Alan Stewart, who lives at 4102 Vest Mill Road, who has a house, lives in a house in the middle of the site plan. The Shove heirs have had our property for sale around 30 years using 6 different real estate companies. We have always required them to post for sale signs along Vest Mill, Westbrook, and Interstate 40 bypass to let everybody know in the surrounding areas that we are trying to sell. About 8 years ago, I met with the Burks and the Stewarts, and we decided to bundle the property together. And we had a couple offers, but like always, they, want you to give the property away. We are very pleased with the proposed site plan, especially the realignment of Vest Mill Road. For over 20 years, the end of Vest Mill Road was a dead end and has been used for a dumping ground. And I'm not talking about small bags of trash, but dump truck loads of construction materials, tires, and all kinds of debris. The Burks have had to come from Maryland to clean it up several times. The city of Winston-Salem eventually added a paved turnaround for garbage trucks at the end. And now the city comes and cleans the debris up. Paid for by the taxpayers. This realignment of Vest Mill Road will eliminate this problem. And as most of you know, lack of housing in the area is very critical. And it's going to get worse in the future for housing. This site provides all kinds of great shopping, medical, schools, and quick access to interstate for travel. And I really thank you for the opportunity to speak today in support of the project. And I appreciate the planning board and the city council for all your service to the people of Winston-Salem. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, there is one more person who signed up and said he may not, he signed up as a proponent. He said he may not speak. I'll just recognize Alan Stewart. If you want to speak, if you would, unmute yourself, state your name, address, and zip code for the record. But if you don't wish to speak, since Mr. Shove did say he was representing you earlier, you don't have to. All right, Mr. Chairman, it doesn't appear he wants to speak.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, we do have one person signed up in opposition. It's Cozetta Slamp. Ms. Slamp, if you would, unmute yourself, state your name, address, and zip code for the record before you begin your remarks.
Hello, Cazetta Craver Slant, 1405 Westbrook Drive, 27103. Our biggest concern is the West Mill Road being run on to Westbrook Drive. As far as Westbrook Drive has been unmaintained for over 20 years since it was brought into the city. And as of right now, it's falling apart. I don't see how it could have any additional much traffic on it. We are a dead end street because of Interstate 40. We're just concerned about the extra traffic on our little street, and that's the biggest thing. The rezoning, I know, is inevitable because it's for the growth. We're not happy that it's going to be apartments. I'd rather see business over there, but no, because of the way the economy is right now, I understand that. That's really all I have to say. Thank you for listening.
Mr. Chairman, that's the only person who signed up in opposition. If I'll open it up if there's anyone who is here who is opposed to this case who had not signed up. If you would unmute yourself, state your name, address, and zip code for the record before you begin your remarks. Mr. Chairman, I don't believe there's anyone else in opposition.
Okay. With this point, I'm going to declare the public hearing closed and open up for questions or comments from any planning board member.
Mr. Chairman, if I go ahead.
I just wanted to, I guess this might have been something Mr. Bryan was going to ask of Mr. Fansler. It's not really related specifically to the approval of this case, but the issue was raised about Westbrook Drive by Ms. Slant. And I noticed on the pictures that Mr. Wilson showed us, it was very obvious that the road there is in extremely poor condition. Just wondered if Mr. Fansler could comment on whether there's any plans to deal with that situation.
Good evening again, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. So great question. And if I may, is now the appropriate time to respond? I'll just confirm that before I start my remarks. Okay, great. So, you know, that's a good question. The challenge here is that this site doesn't occupy the frontage, right, of Westbrook. It's an existing city street that is basically underperforming. So the mechanism to address that would be done through city maintenance. And one thing that I think has been an element that needs to be addressed in this regard is addressing the poor width, the pavement condition, and the lack of resurfacing needs that has been, for obvious reasons, there has been insignificant traffic on the road. That is expected to change. So I think moving forward, the mechanism to address that will be done through city maintenance forces. The challenge with this development is they're connecting to public right-of-way, which is a great, connection that they're providing to distribute the trips that the site will generate. Then I think, given that they don't occupy the frontage and we're getting outside of the scope of what they're coming in to do, it falls on city to assess that, which we would do annually. And so what I can commit to doing is referring to the annual assessments of that road, and then apply the understanding that the new development will be adding to the current demand on that road, and we can assess the need with that background information. I think will be better for decision makings when it comes time to allocate dollars for resurfacing or street improvements. We can then have that background data to justify the needs moving forward. But it is a valid concern. I think the challenge here is that the mechanism to get that improved is really outside of the frontage that this property occupies.
Right. Thank you.
If I can ask you a follow-up question, Mr. Fansler, the intersection of Vest Mill and Westgate, Ashley, is currently a real issue. I mean, I think it's a four-way stop or something like that, and oftentimes gets a lot of stacking and backup, not to mention during rush hour. in there. So what's the future thinking? I mean, how are you going to help this development out with both this Westbrook Drive and that particular intersection? Is there thought of putting a stop light there or something? I know it's awful close to Healy.
That's right. And you bring up a good point, because that is a multi-way stop right now, an all-way stop. And the challenge is when you have an all-way stop with turn lanes, right, there's some turning movement confusion. It's just a driver behavior issue. So to answer your question, Winston-Salem DOT is aware of that. We have studied that for a traffic signal in the past. It did not meet warrants. So I think our work as the city grows, as this site develops out, is to continue analyzing that and then apply the growth of the development to this intersection. Once we know what the traffic distribution will be, study that when it's built out, and then apply whatever mechanism needs to address the traffic at that time. However, if my memory serves me correctly, there wasn't sufficient accident data or volume to support a traffic signal at this time. But I will say your concern is valid, because when you have an all-way stop condition with turn lanes, there is a right-of-way control issue of just driver behavior, since that is an atypical four-way stop. But it's an education piece, but it's also an ongoing intersection that Winston-Salem DOT is aware of and will continue to study as this area continues to develop.
Thank you.
And if I could do one more follow-up to both of the preceding questions, it would be to ask Mr. Fansler, as you look at what might be needed in the future for Westbrook in terms of improvements, is it your current thinking that you're going to be able to look at that relative to CIP request for the upcoming fiscal year or for some time thereafter?
That's a good question. It's a timing question, right? Of when this site will get built. And, this is the short segment of Westbrook Drive and the full build out of this project. The timing of that has to line up. So to answer your question, I don't foresee that in this coming year. I think we would have to work with our maintenance staff and understand what the needs will be, and then do some funding analysis and estimates to determine which CIP platform that would best qualify for. So I guess that's not really a great answer, but at this time, we just don't have that data to understand what will be needed there until this site is built out, or we get closer to understanding what it will do.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I just want to go back, but based on Mr. Dickey's projected square footage per acre, and Mr. Fansler messaged me and gave me the trip rate per 1,000 square feet. Based on that, it appears that there would be between 1,500 and 1,600 trips per day if the entire 13.1 acres developed as office. So again, probably double the amount, a little less than double the amount, but again, different distributions throughout the day.
One piggyback on that, if I may, just to provide a little more context, is as Mr. Dickey did mention, we did ask for a trip generation summary on this that also included some distribution, so we would kind of get an understand, given that we have two major streets that would be attracting traffic, one being Stratford Road, the other being Haynes Mall Boulevard. And the thought was that given the way this loop road would connect Westbrook and Best Mill, we had a 50-50 split essentially. So you think of the demand isn't going to just heavily favor one or the other. We're taking the trips per day and we're going to distribute those about evenly to both facilities, just for some context.
All right, thank you. Are there any additional questions or comments? All right, what is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence. I move that the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Second. Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? Mr. Murphy, would you please call the roll?
George Bryan?
Yes.
Melinda Dunnigan?
Yes.
Walter Farabee?
Yes.
Jason Grubbs?
Yes.
Clarence Lamb?
Yes.
Chris Leak?
Yes.
Mo McCray?
Yes.
Brenda Smith?
Yes.
Jack Stillman?
Yes.
And Mr. Chairman, Clarence again, I further move that the planning board recommend approval of W 3515.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any further discussion? Murphy, would you please call the roll?
George Bryan,
Yes.
Melinda Dunnigan,
Yes.
Walter Farabee,
Yes.
Jason Grubbs,
Yes.
Clarence Lamb,
Yes.
Chris Leak,
Yes.
Mo McCray,
Yes.
Brenda Smith,
Yes.
Jack Steelman.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, the board, that recommendation to council is unanimous for approval. And with that, we'll go to the final public hearing item, which is UDO CC 16, and we'll hear from Tiffany White.
Good evening, Chairman Leak and board members. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. All right. I am here tonight to present UDO CC 16, which is a request by Planning and Development Services staff in conjunction with city and county attorneys' offices to amend sections 6, 8, and 10 of the UDO in response to the North Carolina General Assembly's passage of SB 300, Part 13, Decriminalization of Certain Ordinances.
Tiffany, I'm sorry to interject. Can you switch your display setting to presenter view?
Sorry. Is that better?
Perfect. Thank you.
Huzzah, thank you. So in September 2021, the North Carolina General Assembly passed Senate Bill 300, which is a wide-ranging criminal justice reform bill. Part 13, the decriminalization of certain ordinances, detailed specific situations where development ordinances could not impose criminal penalties, including enforcement of any provisions which draw their legal basis from North Carolina General Statute 160D, which is that land use enabling statute for the bulk of the UDO that you remember had a huge UDO amendment not too long ago. Planning staff and attorney's office staff from both the city and the county reviewed the UDO to determine areas where criminal penalties would need to be removed in order to comply with SB 300. Staff identified 4 sections that would need modifications to comply with SB 300 listed there, and language that referenced criminal penalties was either removed or modified. Staff believes this text amendment will have minimal impact on our ability to enforce UDO standards, as it's been over 20 years since any criminal penalties have been used here. Civil penalties will remain the primary tool for correcting any violation and ensuring compliance with the UDO. And with that, we recommend approval of UDO CC 16. And I am happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I don't see any questions.
Mr. Chairman of the board, I'm not aware of anyone who has signed up either as a proponent or an opponent. I'm sure that's not shocking given this groundbreaking text amendment that we're doing here. But again, it is to bring us into compliance with the general statutes. And again, this is a tool we rarely use. Like I said, it's been over 20 years since we have. So again, no one signed up in opposition for it or against it.
All right, thank you. I'm going to declare the public hearing closed. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence. I move that the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? Murphy, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Chairman, if I could just clarify that we don't need a comprehensive plan motion on this.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just reading the boilerplate.
I don't believe so. If you would consider modifying your recommendation just for approval of the text amendment.
I modify my motion. This is Clarence, Mr. Chairman. I move that the planning board recommend approval of UDO CC 16.
Modified motion. And renewed and seconded by Mr. Grubbs.
All right.
Mr. Murphy, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. George Bryan.
Yes.
Melinda Dunnigan,
Yes.
Walter Farabee,
Yes.
Jason Grubbs,
Yes.
Clarence Lamb,
Yes.
Chris Leak,
Yes.
Mo McCray,
Yeah.
Brenda Smith,
Yes.
Jack Steelman.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, that recommendation is unanimous for approval.
All right. That carries us through to our staff report, Mr. Murphy.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just a few things. I want to, first of all, introduce a new staff member that we have. I'm not sure if Gary is still on here or not, but we have hired Gary's replacement, and that is Mark Allred. And with that, I'll turn it over to Desmond to continue the introductions, and then we'll let Mark say hello.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Again, Mark Allred comes to us with around 20 years of experience in the planning profession. Most recently, he was with, I think it's a town, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, of Trinity. But he has experience all over the Piedmont Triad region. He's worked with the Piedmont Triad Regional Council. And before it was that, he worked with the Northwest Piedmont Council of Government. And he has a lot of other experience as well. Mark is going to be a tremendous asset for our department, especially with regard to interactions with small towns because of his past experience. So we're looking forward to him being able to not necessarily replace Gary, but be able to kind of work in the same capacity and build those relationships in the same way that Gary was able to. So we're very excited to have him.
Thank you. I'm grateful to be here. I just want to say you can't replace 21 years of experience with that Gary gave, but the week I've been here, the staff's been fantastic, and I'm real appreciative, and I can't wait to know everybody, get to know everybody of the planning board.
Mark, thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you for accepting. We look forward to working with you and building a relationship with you.
Mr. Chairman, my second item is I'm going to turn to Kirk for a work session preview. I'll just let you know that we are we're a little light on content, but we are looking and we're actively looking for a little bit of educational opportunity that we think might be beneficial as we move into perhaps the comprehensive plan or some other elements that we'll be tackling over the next 6 months to 18 months. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kirk.
Thank you, Chris. Good evening, Chairman Leak, board members. We actually have some good late breaking news on that item Mr. Murphy was just talking about. Jeff Fansler, Jeff, if you're still on the call, Jeff has agreed to speak to us at the work session about transportation planning projects currently in place for the city DOT, as well as infrastructure or street and road improvement projects that are going on. So that should be very interesting. Other items, it's going to be the Steve Smotherman show. Around this time of the year, you all will recall that he does several different trends reports that capture data and values related to construction and permitting from the previous year. He's going to be presenting a report about downtown Winston-Salem development numbers. He'll be presenting the calendar year 2021 recap of the development dashboard, which if I remember correctly, we spoiled a little of that at our last meeting, saying that it was a record-breaking year, but we'll let Steve get into that. And finally, he'll also be talking about subdivision activity for the last couple of years. So should be a well-rounded work session, and hopefully we'll get you all out at a reasonable time as well.
Thank you, Kirk. The next item under staff report is to turn to Desmond, who'll give you a preview of your March caseload.
Hello again. In March, we have 5 zoning petitions lined up. Most of those are general use requests, so you won't be looking at too many site plans next month. We also have 1 preliminary subdivision and 1 planning board review that has split jurisdiction between the county and Walkertown.
All right. Thank you, Desmond. Just a couple more items. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention, the Weaver Winston fertilizer fire, and some of the discussion that is centered around that. Again, you have a manufacturing facility that has been in place for 82 to 83 years, obviously operating under old, non-existent zoning regulations, old building code regulations. So we have started some internal discussions, not prompted by council, not prompted by planning board. We can anticipate probably some of those requests and discussions coming, but we, as a staff, have already started trying to research whether or not there are kind of any best practices for, kind of subsets of manufacturing C that deal with hazardous materials, storage of hazardous materials. Obviously the building codes today would be drastically different for, a fertilizer plant than they were in 1939. So you already have what's in place under a building code regulation. We're also looking at it from a zoning perspective to see if there are any best practices around the country, anything that we can it's our motto, we don't necessarily want to, we don't have to invent the process if there's already good models out there. So, we're taking a look, and actually Steve's going to be spearheading that, since he is sort of general industrial. For those who aren't aware, that's kind of he is kind of an expert in industrial things. So he's going to be taking a look at that. And again, it's not necessarily anything that we're looking to bring forward at this point, but I just want to let everyone know that, we understand, obviously, we averted a catastrophe. And, we have existing regulations in place, and there wasn't anything that was going on there that, wasn't in compliance with the ordinance, wasn't in compliance with the building code that we're aware of, again, because it was the building codes from 1939, which didn't exist. But, again, we need to make sure that if they want to build back, if someone else wants to come and locate one of these somewhere in our community, that we're prepared, and we can make sure that they're as safe as possible and that the public is safe. So again, I just kind of want to mention that as something that's hanging out there that we're already proactively looking at. And the final item that I had was when we had our work session in January, we handed out the work program. It's kind of a mid-year update, and we basically said if you had issues or anything you wanted to discuss on the work program, that we would bring it up here at this meeting. Didn't have anything formal on the agenda, but felt like we could just do it under for the good of the order or staff report. If there are a number of items, I suppose we could tackle it again at work session, and give you a little more time to digest it. But with that, I'll kind of open it back up to the planning board, if there are items on the work program that you feel like we need to discuss.
I've sort of dropped the ball on having made my remarks that there were some thoughts I'd like to share, Chris. In fact, I worked on that again some last night, and I will pledge to you, your staff, and the board to have an email out to you in the morning. I don't think it's anything earth-shattering. I hope it's instead more so thought-provoking.
Understood. Look forward to it.
Thank you.
If there is anything else, then Mr. Chairman, that's all I had under staff report.
All right. Anything else for the good of the order?
Yes, we'll have our motion to adjourn, and I hope everybody gets to enjoy some of our nice weather for tomorrow. It's supposed to be
Have a motion.
60s. Yeah.
Second.
All right, second. Let's go enjoy 60 degrees tomorrow. Everybody have a positive evening.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Night.
Night.
Bye-bye.